Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Neha, and welcome to the Unitarians podcast. Today's topic will be violence in media, which is related to our social psychology podcast. We will be joined by for the discussion by two guests from Unitar's Faculty of Education and Humanities. Please welcome Kritina Dhanapal and Siti Nur Amira.
Thank you, Sneha, for having us here today.
Yeah, and we are so excited to be part of this educational podcast.
All right, welcome. So let us not waste any more time and get started with our session. So today we will be discussing some questions with our guest regarding media violence. But before we get started, let me give a brief explanation of what media violence is. All forms of mass communication that depict the threat to use force, the act of using force, or the consequences of using force against animate beings are considered media violence, which also includes cartoon characters or other species as well as humans. TV shows, movies, video games, comic books, and music are all examples of media. Over 5 decades of scientific evidence have led to the unmistakable conclusion that exposure to violent media increases aggression. This topic has been the subject of approximately 300 studies involving over 50,000 subjects. So, yeah, that's it. So, moving forward for the first question with Miss Amira. What causes media violence? Will you like to explain us?
Okay, sure. The concept behind the media violence is to show people, such as young children who may not be able to distinguish between right and wrong. So, the violent media, which can take the form of a newspaper, book, television, radio, or a video game, in which this type of image or messages may end up having an effect on the person who is exposed to these images, children or anyone else who lacks of firm understanding of right and wrong, may become desensitized to violence as a result of their exposure to harmful media, and they may even believe that there is nothing wrong with what they are seeing with.
Well, I agree because this can have an impact on their social behavior, causing them to do things that are socially unacceptable. This behavior is a direct result of media violence and the child becoming desensitized to violence depicted in the media, and it is the media which releases these images that repeatedly depicts acts of violence, serving as the primary source of desensitization.
Not only that, but it's been discovered that violent video games exposure was associated with an increased composite aggression score, increased aggressive behavior, and increased aggressive cognition, which was consistent with the literature we review on our task force that concluded that the violent video game use is a risk factor for negative outcomes. But there were not enough studies to investigate any potential link between violent video games use and delinquency of criminal behavior. So as we can see that video games are only a small part of the vast area of media available to young people throughout the day. So while teenagers spend more than 6.5 hours per day on screens, including social media and online videos, the average time daily spent playing video games was only 56 minutes for boys, and meanwhile for the girls are 7 minutes for girls.
I certainly agree with the statement because there is little evidence that spending more time on social media correlates directly with aggressive behavior. But there is literature linking certain types of internet use to increase aggressive behavior. For example, quality of online exposure may be a factor. Youths who committed serious crimes were significantly more likely to have viewed violent online content. Furthermore, similar to how media coverage of suicide can spread, copycat suicides, there is evidence that some mass killings may be influenced by other violent acts in the recent past. Because the internet now allows unrestricted access to images of real life violence, for example, recent videos of murders and gang violence uploaded to Facebook Live, the overall exposure to and the potential for copycat violence may be increased. As for the next question, Miss Amira, would you share with us how many types of media violence are there?
Sure. As you can see, the effects of media on aggressiveness have long been a source of concern. Extensive research has been conducted over the last several decades to try to establish a link between broadcast violence and its impact on viewers. The relationship between screen violence and street violence has been studied since the early day of television, with some claiming over 3,000 studies have been conducted over the last 4 decades. There are three types of media triggers media violence, that is television. So 71% of children aged 8 to 18 have a television in their bedroom. Furthermore, 50% of people in this age group watch television online or mobile devices on daily basis. So research discovered that 8 to 12-year-olds watch television programming for an average 1 hour and 23 minutes per day, while 13 to 18-year-olds watch for an average 1 hour and 45 minutes per day, with roughly 90 minutes and 38 minutes of this time spent viewing television content on other devices, respectively, for example, computer, smartphone, tablet, MP3 player. Weapons are shown 9 times per hour on prime time television. So the violence depicted in television content is frequently significantly, even in programs that are not advertised as violent, and children shows are especially violent. So Saturday morning cartoons were once a common feature of American life, so children can watch cartoons whenever they want. According to study that examine the content of popular cartoons, they contain 20 to 25% violent acts per hour, which is roughly 5 times as many as primetime programs. For video games, almost every American adolescent, 97% of males and 83% of females play video game. So 80% of teens play video game on a game console at least 3 hours per week, with 25% playing 11 hours or more per week. Teens who identify as fan of competitive video gaming or esport receive additional exposure among 14 to 21-year-old. Nearly as many identify as esport fan as professional football fan. Many video game content, violent content, and research has found a link between violent video game exposure and increased aggression, desensitization to violence, and decreased empathy. So, a video game in which players assume the roles of aggressor of soldier allow them to be virtual perpetrators. So, players are also rewarded for successfully carrying out violent behavior in this game. According to studies, the general effect of violence on these children may be more profound when they play this interactive game rather than being exposed to violence in more passive manner, such as when watching television. Uh, Now, for movies, despite a national rating system, several researchers have reported an increase in violent content in movie. According to studies, 91% of movies shown on television contain violent, including extreme violence. Although film rating and advisory labels can assist parents in determining which films to avoid, certain labels such as parental discretion advice and R rating have been shown to attract children, particularly boys. In 2003, the most popular R-rated film of the year had been seen by 10 million adolescents aged 10 to 40, including 1 million 10-year-olds. According to one study, there were twice as many negative themes most commonly associated with violence as positive themes depicted in the 25 grossing R-rated films between 2012 and 2017. So, according to researchers, the amount of gun violence in top grossing PG-13 films has more tripled since the rating was introduced in 1985. So, in 2012, PG-13 films had more gun violence than R-rated films. Furthermore, violence can be found in the films that are not considered violent, such as animated films.
Wow, that's a lot of numbers to remember. Thank you for answering the question, Amira. So, moving forward to the third question with our second guest of the day, Miss Kritina. So, Miss Kritina, are there any effects of media violence on children? If there is, would you mind sharing it? What kind of effects there are?
Okay, so first of all, thanks Neha. Yeah, when it comes to media violence, it does have impacts on children without partiality because one of the most growing concerns is the impact of media violence on youngsters. The television movies and video games expose kids to a lot of negative ideas. Children often watch television shows that promote violence. Their minds have been permanently imprinted with television images, so they see scenes of conflict and violence all the time. Children's minds are being brainwashed with these violent images as they are absorbed. These violent images are absorbed by children and taken for granted in their minds. So some kids grow to fear violence, while others develop an obsession with it. Because of their obsessions, these kids frequently hurt other kids. So television and movies and video games all have clear negative effects of media violence on children. These media often purposely and repeatedly employ violent imagery. The images are frequently replayed. Children frequently transfer these messages to other family without ever being aware that they are doing so. So children who experience the negative effects of media violence may develop serious psychological issues. So, fortunately, there are a number of things that parents, guardians, and educators can do to lessen the harm the media violence causes to children. So, education is a useful strategy for achieving this. Parents must become aware of the violence on television and learn how to handle it. Early media violence education for kids is a very effective strategy for preventing negative influences in the future. It is also a vital talent for assisting kids in forming constructive attitudes toward violence.
Yes, I really agree with your words. The impact of media violence on children's self esteem is one of its most major impacts.
Mm.
Violence portrayed on television or in movies frequently has an important impact on how children view themselves and other people. Children's perceptions are usually about the world change when they're exposed to violence frequently. I think especially in on television and in movies.
Yeah, so these negative effects of media violence on children can have a profound impact on children's lives. Children who have experienced violence on a regular basis may lose faith in their capacity to handle difficult situations. So, problem with behavior may result from this. So additionally, some kids may experience depression or develop an anxiety disorder. So disabling disorders of this nature can have negative effects on one's health and ability to learn. So fortunately, there are a number of ways to for parents to protect their children from the harm caused by media violence. There are several educational proposals that focus on how media violence affects kids. So, parents watching over their kids while they play is one of the most successful tactics. The creation of aggression behavior in a child may be the first sign that they have been exposed to violence. So, you can spot any clues that a child may have been exposed to violence by watching your children while they play. So surprisingly, uh, there are variety of informational resources available for parents to use in order to learn more about how violence in media affects children. The website of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which is called AACAP, is one of these resources. Here are a number of resources that can assist parents in comprehending and addressing the negative effects of violence on children. Being conscious of the violence effects on your child's emotion is one of the most important keys to managing the effects of media violence on children. You can then handle it better as a result of this. Monitoring your child's feelings will help you achieve this. For example, you can tell there is a problem if your child starts to cry because they are upset. So then you can try to calm your child's emotions by providing calming activities like reading or coloring. So the impact of media violence on children's education is among its most harmful effects. Although it may seem like a small issue, playing violent video games can frequently encourage aggressive behaviors in kids. So children who play violent video games are more likely to act violently as adults. So, according to studies, therefore, it is crucial that you keep an eye on how much time your kids spend playing violent video games, and that you make sure that they know when you expect them to come home from school. Yeah, thank you.
Well, to add on to that, I think it is very, from what I understand, is that it is very important to keep in mind that kids have different perspectives. Sometimes what they see or hear will cause them to act or feel in a certain way.
Mm,
Therefore, we adults should never discuss the negative effects of media violence on children with your kids. Instead, say encouraging things like your child is special and that he or she will be a good person when they grow up. This is a very extremely important because many kids who fall victim to violent video games and behaviors already have a low self-esteem.
mm,
So, well, as for the next question, is Miss Christina, does violence in media cause violence in real life?
Um, In my opinion, yes, if a younger audience sees violence, they could be desensitized. Exactly, there's a lot of evidence pointing towards that younger audience don't view violence the same way as older people do in the older days. But I definitely do think there is some correlation. Let me first share an article from Psychiatric Times, and it said last year 2021 the Media Violence Commission for Research on Aggression reported media violence over the past 50 years, and it said that a large number of studies conducted regarding watching violence in television, films, and video games increases the likelihood for aggressive behavior and thoughts. Personally, I feel like it's pretty not obvious, but I will say there definitely is a sense to it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because you see, if you're around like violence a lot, especially people have like rough upbringings, they definitely tend to be more violent, especially in their adult years, because that's all they have ever known. And that's how they like it's like an outlet for them. And yes, like we are a product of our environment, so if you introduce this type of things into the media that younger kids are consuming, I think it's definitely going to have some impact on their behavior at some degree at least. Well, thank you, Miss Christina, for sharing such valuable answers. So back to our first guest, Miss Amira. Since you explained the types of media that triggers media violence, can you please tell us which media is harmful?
Sure. Okay. As you can see, it's also important to consider who watch violent media. A variety of personality traits appear to put some viewers at higher risk than others. The trait of aggressiveness is a key variable. So people who are naturally aggressive appear to be more affected by violent media than people who are not naturally aggressive. So the relationship between trait aggression and violent media, on other hand, is complex, and these findings only represent trait differences at single point in time.
All right. How about you tell us who is the most affected by media violence?
Okay, well, media violence also increase street aggressiveness, which increase the likelihood of aggressive behavior. This implies that the short-term effects of violent media observed in experimental research may become more pronounced with the individuals as they are repeatedly exposed to violence, resulting in a downward spiral into high levels of aggression. Importantly, longitudinal studies have looked into the cause of this downward spiral. It could be argued that aggressive people are more likely to watch violent television shows. Research discovered that while exposure to aggressive media as a child is related acts of aggression later in life, so aggression as a child is unrelated to exposure to a violent media as a young adult, effectively ruling out the possibility that this effect is caused by predisposition to watch violent media.
Yeah, because you see, it's also important to know when someone has been exposed to violent media. Although all age groups are equally vulnerable to the short term effects of violent media on aggression, early exposure to violent television is a particularly strong predictor of later violent behavior because it is unclear whether this finding is the result of more years of exposure to violent media or of exposure to violence during a critical period of children's social development. Thank you, Amira. As for the last two questions for the day, we'll be ending with Miss Kritina. So, Miss Kritina, what do you think about the effects of violent media?
Okay, so as we know, exposure to violent media can have a number of negative consequences. People who watch a lot of violent media become less sympathetic to victims of violence. In one study, people who played violent video games were less harsh on criminals than those who played non-violent games. Following exposure to violent media, people perceive victims as less injured and show less empathy toward them. People may become more tolerant of violence and less sympathetic to victims over time because they become desensitized to it. According to studies, people have lower heart rates and blood pressure in response to realistic depictions of violence after consuming violent media.
Um, from what I personally understand is violent media not only desensitize people to the effects of violence, but it also increases aggressive thoughts. As a result, people who watch a lot of violent media are more likely to pay attention to hostile information and expect others to behave similarly. They may also interrupt ambiguous situations negatively, assuming that others' behavior reflects hostility rather than other more positive traits like assertiveness. Well, there's also according to some studies, violent media increases aggressive feelings. Most importantly, watching violent media makes people more aggressive towards other. So, Ms. Christina, is there any solution that you can share with us to end the media violence?
Yeah, sure. There are some easy solutions for ending media violence. Like you can turn off all media. First of all, you can turn off all media because we understand the value of being aware of our surroundings. But we also understand that we don't have to be completely, deeply involved in them. Fear is a big theme in our media and it keeps us interested. Take a quick break if all these news stories are everywhere and on your social media, then give that a break as well. You will recover more quickly if you keep quiet on this front. And also you can practice self-care. We need to work even harder to take care of ourselves when violent things happen in our world. and it stresses us out. So take care of yourself as you would a young child and a devoted mother. Invest more time in your sleep. Give yourself wholesome natural foods that will improve your mood. Even a 5 minute walk of session of stretching can help you release tension. Take it easy at work and avoid packing your calendar with extra commitments except doing less. And then thirdly, you can re-engage beauty. So visit, you can visit a park to observe the squirrels or going for a walk on the beach. Sit among the trees and take in the wind sounds. Explore the grass, observe the clouds, purchase flowers, visit an art gallery, participate in live music, spend some time renewing your spirit, reminding yourself that there is beauty all around you and that there is good in the world. So yeah, you can re-engage beauty, and you also can reconnect with friends and family. Bring a friend along for lunch. Speak to your parents. Continue to give hugs. Say I love you to them. Send a coworker flower. Bring pizzas with you to work, of course, and go the extra mile to express your gratitude to those around you. Make love letters. Chocolate should be left for your best friend. Send your neighbor brownies. Engage in thoughtful kindness and reconnect. So this is the way you can reconnect with friends and family. And lastly, you can find laughter. Obviously, this is important. You can find laughter. We all need to laugh, and research has shown that it can almost always make things better. Rent a funny old movie on YouTube. You can find amusing videos of cats, dogs, or even a laughing baby. Check out a comedy club. Find a stand up act of your favorite comedian and enjoy it with friends. Make it a goal to laugh as frequently as you can in your life. Play a ridiculous board game or go karaoke with your buddies. Go find whatever makes you laugh. So these are the most important way that can less violence in media.
Wow, that was very useful. And thank you for answering my question. It was actually nice to do those stuffs. It
Yeah.
was a beautiful solution regarding media violence. So, viewers, our podcast has reached the end, and hoping you guys understand what we are trying to say through this podcast regarding media violence, because it's a very important issue to be considered. So, thank you, Ms. Amira and Kritina, for allocating your time for the podcast. And I will see you guys again with a new topic. Have a nice day, everyone. I'm signing off from the Unitarians podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 I'm an icon, man. Ain't no girl about a 10. I should fuck her in the